everybody. Yeah, so indeed, 2 days ago, I met Joachim for the first time. And then I was like, okay, after the conversation, ditching my slides. I still have some to visualize a couple of things, but yeah, so we will dive into it. So my name is Tina. I'm born and raised in Germany and have been living now in Amsterdam for like 5.5 years. And lived in different countries before that, and have always been like a little bit on this seek of freedom and independence. You could say like typical Generation Y or millennial, which might be true. And also came across this question of purpose pretty early. And also in that context, the question of wholeness and integrality and how we could think differently in the organizational context. And I came across an organization in the south of the Netherlands in the end of 2016, when they were in the process of starting to implement holacracy. You probably know holacracy, a self-management tool, which was at that time like one of these tools that built up the most, let's say, holocratic view in organizations. So I was sold pretty quickly, joined that organization operating in the oil and gas industry, which was quite something. And we went on quite a journey of going from this holacracy kind of very rigid system organizing around work to realizing, okay, we need this people space to actually deal with personal and interpersonal tensions. And that was quite a process, because I was holding the role of quality time at that point. And I made the decision, okay, we should all go to Vegas and we should all have our first vacation working out of the Zappos facilities. You probably have heard of Zappos. And so we did that, but obviously spending 24/7 together, being in a different country, being triggered about a lot of things, having sleep deficit and other things, a lot of tensions came up. So then we made the decision, you know what, we are creating this personal space and we have a focus on it. So everybody got their individual coach, and we took it very seriously to develop on self-awareness and self-love, which also resulted in self-accountability, actually, which is one of the foundations, I would say, to actually practice self-management or any distributed authority system, decentralized system, network-based working, and having a good collaboration and co-creation. And as you can imagine, in that time, the question of purpose came up. Like, if you start working on yourself, you learn about your triggers, and then you ask yourself at some point, hey, what gets me out of bed in the morning? And why am I commuting to the office every day? So we also took that very seriously and went on this very intense individual purpose journey in the collective, which brought a lot of strength also to the relationships, because it was quite an experience to get in touch with your own story and such. And to just give you a little bit of picture of it, like, I've always had the feeling like, okay, I was pulled in a certain direction, but also very guided by core values. And then it was the time to put words to it. That's what we did in that process. So finding things out and then putting words to what we call purpose. So in my case, that meant like my purpose is breaking down boundaries to connect worlds. That was very beneficial during that time, like to have words to it. Maybe I have a different opinion about that today, but it was very valuable. And then out of that process, also the question came up, what is actually the purpose of the organization? So same process for the organizational context. And then we were kind of like, infected by purpose, let's say. So it was like, hey guys, what about we make purpose the center point of everything what we do, and we make purpose the only boss of the organization. So we came across a model and we implemented it also, again, very seriously. And we made it literally the center point of everything, which means salary systems. You were compensated on a purpose contribution. How much you would contribute to the purpose, you would earn. Hiring, firing. Is there alignment to purpose? Yes or no? You could be fired or hired on that. obviously also purpose as being the center point of business model, strategy, and everything else. So purpose became not just like the shining star at the horizon, but purpose became the star, kind of like, shining over everything. So at some point, this went to an extent where also the common narrative was around, well, it's good for the purpose, so we do it, right? And that, to a certain extent, in my personal case, became to a point that purpose was overruling everything. My personal needs, my core values, and I did everything for purpose as well. And at some point, I felt like there's a disconnect, and I started questioning this concept. And obviously, also COVID, accelerated different kind of processes in that too. But I was like, okay, somehow it doesn't feel that connected anymore. And then in that process, my core values got stronger, which was really interesting. So I was like, okay, this somehow goes against my values and it doesn't make sense anymore. And that skyrocketed last summer. So in the beginning of July, I made the decision to leave the organization. And 2 weeks later, on my last office day, I broke down. It was like, you watch a building at night and the lights go out like room by room. That's how I broke down in the office, and I suffered a burnout. And I was honestly, I was not surprised, because we were in a constant transformation for almost 5 years. And deprioritizing personal needs has quite some impact, obviously. So I was emotionally very exhausted, and then it was just a matter of time when the body would catch up. So then obviously I didn't have another choice but reconnecting to myself again, then to the outer world, and so forth. But why am I telling you this today is I've been here 2 years ago at the Teal around the world, and I talked about this evolutionary purpose story with all its glory and its beauty. But there is obviously, it wouldn't be integrated and whole if there is not another side to it. And I think it's important to share these learnings, because when you start, I don't know any other organization in the world that radically implemented it like that and went that far. So if you're pioneering stuff, you need to also share the learnings. I think this is how it works, and this is how new work works. So so I would love to also, okay, now I get to some slides because it makes it a little bit more tangible. So obviously not everything was bad. That's not what I'm saying. I'm also not saying purpose is bad. It's just a matter of integration. So what was great the past 5 years was that when we started out with Holacracy, we started out with this kind of infamous role and soul division. And that was super valuable, because you start kind of distancing yourself from a role, in terms of you're not defining yourself with the role anymore. So sometimes it's just good to ask yourself the question, who am I, without saying what I do, right? Then I jumped to this part, the personal development part, because it's directly connected, as I already mentioned. Working on self-awareness and self-love, which also naturally actually results into self-accountability, is, to me personally, one of the major foundations of practicing self-management or a distributed authority model. And then finally, also exploring the topic of purpose as individuals and keeping it as individuals also was very valuable, also in the relationship to others, because you're experiencing something together on a very deep level. So, but now we get to the interesting stuff. So I dive directly into, because I made slides to that to visualize it a little bit better. So as I told you, there was a lot of transformation going on. So a major part of this purpose is the only boss model took place when COVID hit. So it started before COVID, but then a lot of happened during the times of COVID. So if you imagine this is you, or this is me in this case, and you are part of this organization, and there is so much transformation going on. You have new salary system introduced, which could mean you are earning 1,500 euro less next month because you are maybe not contributing to the purpose as you are supposed to, whatever that means, right? So you have quite some conversations going on at home. Then also because part of it was also the legal system, like a shared ownership model. So not everybody wanted to be a shared owner because everybody has different needs in different periods of times, but that also created quite some pressure and discussion, and also in a way distraction, because you had to have these conversations. Then on industry level, the oil and gas industry is obviously a very challenged industry, and there's a lot of transformation and change happening, but also the oil prices dropped. So everything kind of like also had an impact on the organization because you had to redefine your business model and such. So you have major transformation going on organizational context, things that directly touch you, like salary, shared ownership, hiring, firing, because somebody was actually let go on a misalignment of purpose. So people were like, am I next now? Like, what does that even mean? Then a new business model you need to be acquainted with and even be creative to build it up. And then on the global level, obviously we have been dealing with the global pandemic, and we had like seven different nationalities coming from Iran, South Africa, the States, India. And the pandemic hit at different places at different times, and then the waves coming again. So there was periods of times these people got calls almost on a daily basis from family, friends, that either friends of friends or friends of family members fell sick or even died with COVID. Now, they didn't know when they would see them again because of the travel restrictions and stuff. So there was just like a lot of instability and uncertainty. But now we had that happening on all the levels. So you could say, well, on individual level, you could be stable and you can deal with all that. In an ideal world, yeah, that would be amazing. However, we are not stable every day. Our process is not linear every day. So what do we have under control to create some stability and to kind of like balance out and stay connected to everything what's going on? So my learning taking out of it is looking at our ecosystem as an interconnected system, obviously, and everything has impact on us and on the organization and so forth. So we could have like balanced out more on organizational level to say not all the transformation needs to be happening right now, but how can we create a stable place here right now and bring some balance in that we as individual can, stay stable again. And Joachim said a beautiful thing the other day. He said, it's like the principle of the oxygen mask on the plane, you use it yourself first and then you give it to others. It's the same like that. First, we create stability in ourselves, and then we deal with transformation. Then this part is a really important one. So it's about living real inclusion. And in doing that, and practically embracing diversity on different levels, as on needs levels, as on needs level is an important one. But what happened in our case was purpose is very abstract. If you look at an organizational purpose, we usually have a very abstract statement. So now trying to take this abstract statement to make it very tangible, to break it down into systems like salary system or hiring, firing is a big challenge. So as an example, we had the salary system, and the purpose contribution there was level 1, 2, 3 or so. So all these levels had practically an explanation, but these words were as abstract as the purpose. So you leave a lot of room for interpretation. So how do people still connect to that? People didn't speak that language anymore. So we introduced a kind of like zoomed out language in the organization on this level of abstractness, which harmed in the end the emotional safe space, because people didn't know anymore how to communicate. That is also obviously impacting collaboration and co-creation. And in the end, this is also impacting the health of the culture and efficiency, productivity, and the health of the overall organization. Then the other part was since purpose was the center part of everything, and the common narrative was, well, if it's good for the purpose, then we do it, and personal needs were kind of like secondary, you had like, there's this fine line between having purpose, the inspirational and motivating kind of statement giving direction, and purpose actually intervening into one's identity. And then the other part was, I said, which was genius, which was nice, was the role and soul division, but also that it only works when you live integration again. So because what we did is this model, this purpose is the only boss model, consisted of 3 contexts, which was the work context, the people context, and the legal context. So now if I would go up to somebody in the break and I would say, hey, I have a question, then I would get the answer, are you talking to me now in a role, or are you talking to me now as a person? So it's like, okay, save it, you know. It's like, then the connection is already broken, because it's like a blocker of communication. So also here, it's really important to live this integration, because it is all interdependent, obviously. The same with personal needs and the organizational needs. We need to align these and look at them as a whole system. Yeah. So, I've been pondering on this question, how could it even get that far, that in our case, purpose overruled the whole system? Because obviously we started out with really great intentions. Like, okay, we live completely flat, we have shared ownership, and only purpose shows us the direction. And I have to say, like, I found my answer in psychology, maybe also a little bit in spirituality, but I came across the principle of ego, the healthy ego and the unhealthy ego. So if we think about the healthy ego, it's our, like the self-organizing principle. It's like the ego helps us to practically keep our stuff together, to have the sense of self. And we can learn from ego when purpose overrules, because the ego brings up obstacles, and it's just about to face them, deal with them, and to integrate. And if we don't, we have a risk that actually ego can hijack the system, in that sense of the unhealthy ego brings a mechanism with itself, which is prioritizing individual needs, because it creates an illusion of separation. So you have this illusion of separation, which was for me this, oh yeah, this is what happened because this is how it was built up in the organization. So if we live that, it has obviously a huge impact on the relationships, on the organizations, on the purpose and everything what's happening. Now, since a major part of all that happened during COVID-19, it accelerated this process, because COVID also to a certain extent created an illusion of separation with the lockdowns and with, not being able to see each other that easily anymore and stuff. So we had more isolation. And I saw these dynamics in the leader of the team, who is not to blame, by the way, because there's always obviously 2 parts to it, and we are not blaming one part. That's not the world we live in my opinion. But since people didn't understand this majorly didn't understand this language anymore about this abstractness of purpose, but it was still the center part of everything. It was like, well, but he understands, so we just give our power away and follow. And the other way around, the leader felt very isolated and alone, and just gave orders at some point. So we created somewhat like a hierarchy again, but on a very unhealthy basis, and not consciously, obviously. So why am I saying this is, it is so important that to look at the whole ecosystem and how we can embrace interdependence in living full integration and inclusion. And I think this is where the magic lies. So yeah, and now I would like to open the space for connection and questions.
Thank you so much, Tine, for your very inspiring talk and this challenge of integrating between yourself, the different parts, but also including in the organization. And we also shared very much what happens when that doesn't happen and when things go to the extreme. So we have one question already from Christian here, And as we only have one question, maybe you want to ask it directly, Christian.
Yeah, thank you very much for your for the inspiration first, Tina. And I kind of came aware that I know this concept since many years too, but when you now talked about it, I became aware that if we talk about organizations in the new paradigm, and the organization is a living being of its own, more or less. And I thought, okay, on a this is the biological definition, but on a psychological aspect, it may develop an own ego, and that may be in yes, that may work against its organs somehow. So the question is, if the how can we find a balance between the whole organism and its organs? I think the same exists in human beings. If you are affected by something and train all the time, then you get exhausted. So I think we have the same on a larger scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what I think is living this kind of integration inside ourselves, you know, like creating this kind of connection inside ourselves in integrating different kind of parts. So when we think of, which I, by the way, think is very true, we look at an organization as a living organism because it simply consists of people that are never, you know, done in their development, that are never, you know, it's always movement and transformation happening. So it's about to create this space to make it safe to have people live that. And I, you know, like ego, if we talk about unhealthy ego, it's like not knowing own boundaries, right? It's like kind of like acting out of fear or selfishness or so. So if we talk about the healthy ego, it's just about knowing where are my boundaries and when do my triggers start practically and how do I deal with that. So we talk about really this personal development part as in, you know, keep developing on your self-awareness part and keep integrating and not just like saying, okay, now it's done and I park it here and now I go to the next, because this is not how the world works, or this is not how this works. I always say this is not how the world works, but we see what's happening right now in a very brutal kind of manner on this side of the world, right? Which is also illusion of separation, or the same in what's happening in the Amazon and with Bolsonaro. It's like also illusion of separation. Like if we deforest the Amazon, you know, it doesn't have impact. And if we start in ourselves to create this connection, we are, you know, automatically creating connection also to the outer world again.
And maybe just a follow-up to Christian's question, right? Essentially, well, if I understood you correctly, it would be an organization can have an ego that can overpower the individuals to the extent that it suppresses the individual, even humanness in a way, right? So is that something you experienced, Tina, that the organization in a way became so overpowering that individuals were almost crushed in this, right? I'm provoking a little bit, right? To take the question a bit further.
I got it.
I would say it's the same thing, because an organization consists of people, and then you have like one that is louder than the others and one that might have more charisma than the other people. So it is easier to follow then. And I think that this is very likely, and this is happening in also different kind of systems, right? But in the organizational one, this is also what happened in our case. I mean, it was in the end this kind of ego that developed, but it felt like that the purpose overruled, you know? So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
yeah. So that's what I thought too. I thought when you said that in the beginning, it's okay, let's concentrate completely on purpose. But I think Lalou has some more aspects, and one is the wholeness. So I think the wholeness maybe creates the balance between the organization and the human being, because we all saw it in the COVID time, that once a group thinking starts, and it's very hard to have a critical opinion, for example, you know. maybe for the measurements of the governments. And so I think it's maybe the same in the organization, that if you concentrate too much on the purpose, and you say, yes, you forget the wholeness, you forget the self-organization, and then you come into this critical circumstances.
Exactly. And in our case, it was like first focus on self-management, then it was to focus on personal development with that wholeness, and then it was the purpose. So, and what was missing was the integration of it, and also not just the integration afterwards, but the integration throughout the process, that, you know, you have it really, you know, go through, and you have it a real evolutionary process practically happening.
So what you're saying is you did it one at a time, but you didn't integrate the pieces. And while you were focusing on wholeness, it was fine, right? But then you parked that completely and went all out on purpose, and it didn't integrate then, right? Then you went to the extreme. So what you're saying is you have to do things in parallel. You have to integrate continuously, right? Integration is not something you can park for later, but it happens every day in a way, right? That's how you're describing it. And
not just that. I mean, we also have business, the business part in it. We have strategy in it. Like, it is really about finding the balance and connection to all these parts. And I think this is what's important. Also, understanding an organization can obviously have a very inspiring purpose, and at the same time has needs, like to either, you know, to survive or to make impact, and the people have needs. So how can we integrate that in this one ecosystem that we are sharing?
Thank you. Very big and important lesson, right? This continuous integration on an ongoing basis. Alexandra, you had a question around linked to psychological safety. Can you maybe directly also pose it to Tine?
No, it's actually wasn't a question. It was just a more or less a statement. And that's why I posted it in the chat, so everyone can read it for him or herself. Yeah, I'm a psychologist. I studied it, so I'm really digging deeper in the whole holacracy thing now, and the wholeheartedness. And as you pointed it out, I think it's really important that you have to think of all levels, and that everything is connected, and that you can't just put your focus on purpose and then forget about the basic needs. Because we do not function like this. So so not really a question, but a statement.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, emotional intelligence. I mean, it just at some point, you know, this emotional safety went down the toilet. in deprioritizing own personal needs. Yeah, it's very true.
And it sounds like it was a process, right? It didn't happen at once. It happened gradually out of initially a good thing, and you didn't probably realize when the turning point came, right? From what I hear you speak, or were there indications, were there signs where that psychological safety was being lost, where you felt?
Yeah, there was some signs in terms of when things weren't integrated that much, and when people were also expressing their doubts about the system, for example. And then it was like it was kind of like, let's say, how to say that, like not normalized, but it was like, oh no, but you know, there's purpose. And then it was like almost saying to somebody, don't you believe in the good? You know, like now saying it in a very flat kind of way, but then people started speaking up less, and then this became more prominent, this whole language also around purpose. So people didn't even join the conversation anymore, and obviously they were not expressing emotions because they were not prioritizing own needs anymore, and needs trigger emotions. So this whole space was not safe anymore at some point, which harmed co-creation and collaboration.
Thanks, Tine. And this goes back to what Christian mentioned earlier, groupthink, right? Some of you might know the concept when people do speak up, but then it's like, you're not part of the flock, you're not getting it, right? You're fundamentally crushed in your speaking up, then people stop speaking up, and they also stop sharing how they feel, right? And that's very, very important point. Thanks for raising that, Alexandra. right? Because looking at the anatomy of the process, right? How does it happen over time? What happens in us? What happens between us? I think that's the really interesting learning here. Jenny has a question around where the company is going from here. Jenny, do you want to also maybe ask it directly?
Thanks, Johan, and thanks, Teal. This is my first Teal around the world, so I loved your vulnerability, actually, that you shared, and thank you very much. I'm really curious from the organisation's point of view, what have they learned from your experiences? I mean, you mentioned all these lights going out on your last day, and I'm hoping some lights went on for the organisation as a result from your feedback. Tell us more.
So I have to say, I started sharing feedback already in the process before leaving the organization, which was at that point not received, because there's always a belief system to it, right? So if you believe in something very strongly, at some point you are not open to another kind of opinion anymore, which was also one of the drivers why at some point I made the decision to leave. But on the hindsight, like, I've been in touch obviously with close colleagues, and a lot of people left. I think over 50% of people were either let go or left. Because, as I said, when there is so much distraction and when there is so much impact also on the organization, it harms co-creation and collaboration. In result, it harms creativity, innovation, productivity, efficiency. It harms the organization. So, or the organization future and success. So, yeah, I think that there are still some people that would have a different opinion to it, because purpose is still like overruling. And the belief system. But other people, they said, okay, I don't want that anymore because I'm really not feeling good. And a lot of people also were building up frustration and anger, which came from suppressing emotions, right? Suppressing needs, and coming to a realization at some point, I have impact on my surrounding, which I don't want to have, because I'm just not myself anymore. Or I'm not a pleasant person to be around with anymore. So you have both still, but the organization still exists and it's still going its way, just with way less people. And to some of the people I haven't talked since July, since I left. Mm-hmm. But not on purpose, it just didn't happen. So it was not like, oh, like I didn't go in like a bad kind of, relationship. So
it sounds like it's not so easy to find a way out when you've already invested so much, right, into that direction, that this seems to be really hard for the organization still, right, to find that exit point.
But it was really hard for me too. I was a part owner of the organization too. I have been there in this for 4.5 years. It was also my baby, so I was emotionally so invested. It was my truth. If you don't see anything else every day, it is your truth, right? This is your reality. And then at some point you feel like, I was blessed that my values got stronger and started questioning more, but then getting to a point of, is that still what I want? And also, obviously, you get feedback from your surrounding. Like my partner at some point said also, wow, you're not like the coolest person to be with anymore, because I suppressed own needs and with that emotions, and then they're coming out in different kind of ways. So, yeah.
And Tine, would you mind even going a little bit further here on what helped you, right? How did you manage to, what were the things that helped you to find this step, right? But also in the environment you started talking about it.
For me, it was really my values that guided me out of that, like that, and just not finding the joy in my daily anymore. So the thing is also, you have to know, purpose was the thing for me also in my life. So I have a friend in California. When he met me, he said, Tine, purpose is written all over your forehead. So I really believed in that very strongly, right? And so it was really hard to question that as well, because you have been living that, and then there was no other organization that could be a role model that had done it before, and it might not have worked that way, right? So but in the end, it was just like questioning more things and also finding more outside perspectives. So connecting with people in the outside, getting different perspectives on it, getting also feedback on how your behavior is. Like, okay, you're not the same person anymore because somehow, you know, you're more irritable and these kind of things. So it's like, okay, what would bring me peace? How can I get my calmness back and my balance back? And what do I need for it? So it was really, yeah, turning to the inside again and finding this reconnection to myself.
Thanks, Tina. And I heard that it's also about, do you still experience joy, right? Do you still even have a positive general emotional state, or do you feel it's taking everything out of you? And that seems to be the case. I think that's an interesting one as well, right? Because we don't tend to talk about these things so much, right? But if purpose becomes a super serious, tense thing where there's no fun in it anymore at all, and you just feel like you're drained, right? Something is wrong. So maybe the emotional indicators, right, was very important. But you also mentioned you needed others. You needed outside perspectives. And
being open for it. Yeah. But it's also what was also interesting. Obviously, we live in times where purpose is such a trendy word. You know, in the Western world, we feel like we cannot survive without purpose. Whereas in indigenous tribes, their purpose is just to be alive like nature is alive. So here again, living as a living organism. So what is the actual added value in knowing what my reason is to be here, right? Or is it just like enough to find the joy in the moment, the calmness in the moment, and you know, you have a passion for certain things, and also how important relationships are. You know, relationships is the essence that keep us happy and healthy. So when this part is kind of like breaking away because purpose overrules, where's the sense? You know?
Absolutely. And maybe Lena, you could also share your comment here with the group or speak to it a little bit. Purpose as a functional attribute. I think that's an interesting one.
I'm also somebody who just really resonates with purpose, and it almost irritates me. I can own my frustration when people are like, my purpose is to, you know, like a hammer is to nail the nail, and it's just losing that human quality in that. And I think it's so easy to even think about from an organizational, personal level. It's something we do, not someone we are. There's no room for wholeness in our common definition of purpose. And it's easy to do it. I mean, like I'm noticing I'm juggling a lot behind the scenes when I don't have my video on right now. I'm getting all the social media out for this event. So it's easy for me to fall into function rather than staying with wholeness. So I'm just really appreciating this chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
And maybe we can go a bit further in this direction, right? What is purpose really? Is it a technical thing, or is it something? Is it a sentence, right? Or is it maybe something more practical or human, as you said, right? And that's been your question for your journey, Tina, right? The question of purpose. So I'm wondering if anyone else has any thoughts in this room around what's purpose to you, and then Tina's comments, because for you it has shifted apparently, Tina, over time, right? And how you saw it. Any other points around this? Any other perspectives? What is purpose for you?
I guess coming back to my functional comment, like I noticed there is my identity that does want to do things and be known as a certain person for doing certain things. So there is an identity in that. But I'm always trying to find what is it that I'm actually trying to embody? What's the flavor behind that? What's the intention behind that? And I try and use that as my guide for defining purpose rather than the result of my actions.
Mm-hmm. So decoding your own intentionality in a way, right?
Yes.
Looking at what am I actually
Absolutely.
doing? Where is it drawing me towards, as opposed to an abstract, right? I'm wondering, Tina, how does that resonate with you, given your story?
Yeah, I like that, and also would make it very, or even more simpler, actually, like what I came up with, because I was asked that question at some point. It was still very early in my healing process of the burnout, but I was like, guys, honestly, purpose for me is just living authenticity on a very integrated and deep level. That's it. because it shows you the next inspired step, you know, kind of like in what direction you go, and you are flowing through life, you know, in that it's a very fluid way of moving forward, with a lot of intention, because you're very true to yourself, and with that, to the people around you. So you stay connected, right? And as soon as you're like staying connected, you also stay connected on a wider level, not just the people around you, but the ecosystem you are part of. So you are, I think, as more as you are developing, yeah, it's a word I actually don't want to use, but as more as aware you get of things happening around you and inside you, I think as more you are contributing already to the world automatically. And that brings for me a sense of purpose and direction.
Amelie, you have a comment as well on this.
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry I had to jump out of the call, and I was so much wanting to hear you. I hope I'm not repeating things. I did a great work of connection to my higher self, to my being, because it was very important to me, but I was a very futuristic person who was really looking forward to purpose. And since I've done this connection, I realized that it's when you, as you just said just now, when you have this connection to yourself and this authenticity to yourself, it's like you're living your purpose at the moment, isn't it? Was my question.
Yeah, that's how I would frame it today. Yeah.
That's such a beautiful and powerful learning, right? That's very much about being present in the moment, living your authenticity, looking at what's in front of you, and then responding, right, with a sense of intentionality, rather than trying to have some really long-term thing that might end up being just uncertainty avoidance, right? That we just want that one thing that now rules our life. But this sounds much more authentic in the moment, right? Responding, being deliberate, being intentional about who you are and what's important to you. Fits very much with what Lena said. Christian had more questions here as well. One was around the match between company purpose and values of the person, right? That's an interesting one. Christian, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's fitting the story you told, because I wondered if, when you said, okay, you broke down because you gave too much or you invested too much in the purpose of the company, and then what brought you out were your own values. Didn't you say this?
Well, I broke down because I deprioritized my personal needs, and needs, you know, trigger emotions. So I prioritize purpose, let's say. But yeah, what came out in that process is then I started questioning, like, is that all? Like, does that make sense? Because I felt somewhat like a gap between me and that whole purpose scenario. Not saying that I didn't believe in that purpose. I still thought it was somewhat like inspiring, but I had a different perspective on it and connection to it. And then my values became stronger and practically guided me to my next step in that sense.
And this is what we were thinking about. I wondered if we have, you can see like two circles. The better they match, the more they should maybe raise the synergy between the purpose of the company that gives you the energy back. But if there is, if the match is not so high, maybe you have to push back your own values and interests for giving the energy to the company. And this is why we are thinking about how to use this in recruiting, because the question is, could it raise some? You said, okay, you like the purpose of the company, or you could identify with it, but the question is, how can we find on a deeper level the possibility to match it in the recruiting, or to address employees when we're trying to find them? Because I think, because if you can manage this, I think there is a great opportunity to create more purposeful work to the people that search it.
Or a great risk. So that is exactly like what my learning taking out of it is. There is a fine line between the organizational purpose, as in giving direction, motivating, being inspiring, and then intervening possibly in the own identity. So in our case, it became so strong because it was the center part of everything that I saw it really intervening in own identity, which took out the authenticity because people deprioritize personal needs and personal, just showing up, wholeness. And in the hindsight now, looking at it, it's like, does it really bring that much added value? Because if I think about it, my purpose was, I told you, like, breaking down boundaries to connect worlds. And I worked in communication in that organization and brand building. So you could say that's an amazing match. I did that. And I did that in this context of this purpose around transforming the oil and gas industry from the inside out. There was a little bit more to it, but I keep it simple now. And I resonated with that purpose. I didn't identify myself with that purpose, but I resonated with that purpose. And I was really burning for this matter because obviously I'm interested that this industry is making a transformation. So I think I can be passionate about that, but I would not go that far to have this purpose identify me, because that would also close up myself in a way, like, okay, my purpose is bigger than that, let's say, but I also, like, I think there is a risk of really excluding talent and excluding people who can really bring a lot of passion and value to the organization. And I've seen this, like, a lot of people were not, like, it was even going that far, like, okay, the right people are going to come to the organization, it's like they're fully going to be invested in that purpose and other people need to leave. But there was other people in the organization who really helped, this organization to go forward. So I think you need to watch out to not make it actually a blocker, like, stay open to it and stay open to this kind of evolvement where it goes, because this purpose evolves as well. It might be different in a year. So it's more important to find, like, the right people that are fitting this culture of transformation and evolution, and then going from there.
Thank you, Tine. And maybe a follow-up, because I think you're touching on a super important point, right? You're saying purpose is not one-dimensional, it evolves, and people are more than purpose, right? They have more pieces to them. They have needs, you mentioned, they have values. And if you make it too one-dimensional, you might exclude a lot of people, and you might actually not create an inclusive environment. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the needs and the values and the inclusion bit. How would you see this balance between, there needs to be some match of purpose, of culture, but there is that individuality, right? That people have different needs, different values, and how do we manage that, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think here again, it's like the matter of integration, right? So also saying, like, purpose is part of the system, and in the same way, the needs are part of the system. So if we have created this common space that we are sharing together, and it's that safe that everybody can practically express their needs and can take care of themselves, and you work on things like self-awareness, that people actually know what they need. And on the same timeline, on organizational level, what are the needs on organizational level, and how can we integrate that on a very deep level to create this kind of wholeness, not just in people. I mean, this is where it starts, obviously, but to make it, part of the whole system, and to look at it as a living organism, that it is evolutionary and it will go forward, and we stay open to it. And there's also one comment I wanted to say when you said before around purpose, is like, when we are fixed on one thing, we are closing up. So you are not that dynamic anymore in going with the next step. So if we are more, in this state of being authentic and we live evolution ourselves, we're also more open for the next things to come, and we can adapt to it also in a more dynamic way.
Beautiful. And you keep saying two things, right? One is about integrating the different pieces, and the other one was the evolution, right? That things grow and evolve over time. And these seem to be two very important themes. And whenever we close down, we become rigid, or we close to just one thing, then we damage actually the natural process of growth and evolution. And then, Emily, maybe that's a good one for you to follow up on as well, because you also mentioned, right, organic side and growth with people. Maybe you want to share your thoughts or a question to Tine.
No, I feel, and this is what I see with some clients which are not Teal yet, but you talk about self-awareness. I talk about getting them mindful about who they are, which, as a French, for me, is about the same. And basically, the idea behind that is really that they accept themselves and that they make the purpose grow together. And purpose can be one thing one day. The more people are coming on board, some are leaving. It's a living system. And I explain to them it's okay. And this is what you talk when you talk about openness, when you talk about being whole together and not whole for yourself. It's about that. And we always come down to the same thing about communicating and accepting growing together. What I'd like to share on that as well is that as human beings, we need community. It's wrong to think that we can be a monk and living by ourselves next to a tree. It's wrong. This is in our head, our spiritual side, and in our heart. But we like being together and grasping a purpose together. This is when they are there, when I can see a group of people being there. I indeed always remind them, don't forget about yourself. You're a voice of the system. Speak it out, speak it out. And when you're silent as well, it's a kind of expressing your voice as well in this system. And this is this awareness as well, which for me is essential with purpose. I see you match.
Yeah.
And maybe I can make this into a question also to Tine, right? This idea of we need to be connected with others and then we start growing together, right? Then the sum becomes more than its parts, and then purpose also evolves. Did you ever experience that in any context where you had that magic, where people were connecting, that openness was created, and then, even the purpose evolved? Tine, do you have any?
I have that with, so today I'm working with 2 different teams, both in Brazil, funny enough. And I have that with like one of these business partners, where there is a constant evolution in it. And it's funny because we're like, our work is around the topic of emotional intelligence. It's around the topic of happiness. So happiness in terms of finding the stability inside ourselves, right? And I mean, like, also going through this process of the burnout and then coming to the essence again, like, okay, what is really important for me? And what came up was the collective and the relationships. And obviously, I don't know if you know the happiness research, the very infamous happiness research from Harvard, but good relationships keep us happy and healthy. So, and obviously these relationships are the foundation of everything, because we can only function in relationship and in connection. Isolation can kill us, right? And isolation is also not helping us to contribute to the world, because how do we co-create and collaborate? And this is so important to have like these kind of relationships that start with ourselves, obviously, like the connection to ourselves, and then to other people, which can contribute to the evolvement of purpose, which can contribute to the evolvement of vision, and just like this wider view on the ecosystem and staying connected and contributing in a meaningful way. So meaning and belonging are, I think, like these 2 things that go really closely also together.
Thank you, Tine. I think that's such a powerful notion, right? This being really connected to ourselves and all the parts of ourselves, not just one, right? Like the purpose, but our whole self, and then being connected to others, right? And when these 2 things are in place, then it seems like we organically evolve and the organization organically evolves. But whenever there is a disconnect, whenever there is that extreme, right, or that severing of that connection, then we run into the danger of things moving in the wrong direction.
And also just one thing to that, because we talked about integration, right? So if we keep moving together, also there's more things coming up. So tension, friction, that's all not bad, right? Because we need that to develop and evolve further. So, but it's about like taking that and to integrate it with ourselves and in the collective. So as an organization as well. And then we evolve naturally further and are prepared for the next steps as well in this interdependent system we live in.
And maybe that's also something, we don't have a lot of time left, unfortunately, but I would love for you to speak a little bit more about tension, right? That what's the role of tension that we feel in ourselves and tension that we feel in the system? How did you experience it? And what's a good way to deal with it?
I mean, tension, obviously, you know, having practiced holacracy for almost 5 years, tension is the situation now and what can be in the future, this gap from now and like this picture in the future. Yeah, I live also with that still, I have to say. This is very positive I take out of holacracy, because also looking at tension as not being a negative, but tension as being an opportunity. And dealing with that in not ditching it or ignoring it, but really looking at all of it, and then, you know, yeah, dealing with it, accepting it, and integrating it. So again, integration, but yeah.
And I love what you're saying, right? That tension will never go away. It's constantly, you will have some tension, right? That's maybe also our impulse to grow. And it's not like trying to make it go away. It's how you deal with it, right? The integration bit.
And it's part of wholeness, because we live in a world of a very strong contrast, right? In every system we are in, and also in ourselves and in relationships and such. So in looking at it as there is no good or bad, it's just part of it. It brings a lot of lightness also to say, and peace, like, oh yeah, that's true, you know, and actually that's just information I can integrate now inside me. Obviously I'm dealing with emotions like sadness or anger or whatever, but also that emotions are actually also just neutral in our personal alarm system and information system that help us evolve.
Yeah. So embracing all of it, right? Not just wanting to be happy all the time, but embracing tension, embracing emotion, whether it's good or bad. Right? Exactly. I see a lot of connection to even Buddhist philosophy, right? Who talks about that a lot. So thank you for sharing that, Tine. And now we only have 2 minutes left. I'm wondering, any final statements, you know, based on this rich conversation, obviously, with also input from others. Anything you would like to share with this group before we close, Tine?
Oh, me.
Yeah, I was wondering for you.
I was like, okay, I want to hear more. Yeah, thank you guys, like really for holding this space as well. This was the first time that I shared all this in such a setting, and so I was very nervous, but I felt very comfortable at the same time. And thank you guys for holding the space. And yeah, I would love to hear actually more from all of you. So.
Thank you, Tine.
Thank you so much for making this possible, and for Tine for showing personal vulnerability. There's so much talk about systems and how to organize an organization. But as we said earlier, right, the #1 TED Talk download of all times is Brené Brown and vulnerability. And it needs courageous people like you, Tine, who are actually willing to go there in a group of strangers and not just academically talking about it. So I think that was a huge achievement that we were able to have this session. Thank you all. And
thank you
Tine.
guys. Thank you.